Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Statesman Podcast, where we unpack Zimbabwe's politics. And today we are going to talk about a story which features a very familiar character. And this story, it simply exposes just how far authoritarian systems will go just to maintain control. And this is the story of Job Sikhala. Job Sikhala represents resilience. He represents persecution. He also represents something funny, which is called political theater. That the regime, he is the playground, and the actors is the regime of Zimbabwe. Now, if you want to find out what happened, stick around just for a few minutes with me. Right, so what happened? On Thursday, 13 November, Job Sikhala is released on bail by South African court. Is released on a $600 bail after having been arrested about a week ago on allegations of transporting explosives, 26 plastic cartridges, and 15 fuse connectors were found in a vehicle that Job Sikhala was using together with his uncle, who is the owner of the vehicle. So what happened was Job Sikhala had been invited in South Africa, and the people that invited him asked to see him at Roslyn Shopping Center. And this person was a very familiar person to Job Sikhala. They have known each other before. They have met before. And the name of the person is called Nigel Sivanda. I'm not sure if the name is a real name or it's a pseudonym or it's an operative name. So you may never know, but according to Job Sikhala, this person was introduced to him as Nigel Sivanda or Nigel Shumba. And they were later joined where they were meeting at Rosalind Shopping Center in Johannesburg. They were later joined by another person that was introduced to Job Sikhala by Nigel as Tinashe Mpofu. And Nigel intimated that Tinashe was his younger brother. So Nigel later asked for a power bank, stating that his phone battery was going dead, and he was expecting some very important messages. And at that point, Job Sikhala's uncle suggested that you can pass your phone to waiters, they can charge it for you, and then when it has gained enough battery, you can take back your phone and you can use it for whatever purposes that you need. But then this guy Nigel, he suggested that he needed the phone with him when the messages are being received. Probably it was supposed to be communication that is to be replied to instantly. So what he then did is he asked Job Sikhala for a power bank, and I'm sure he had already realized that Job Sikhala had a power bank. And the power bank was in the car. So after some back and forth, Tinashe Mpofu went to get the power bank. Job had no suspicions whatsoever, because Nigel, whom he had begun to recognize as a friend, he had met. They met together. He was introduced to him by the person who authored this book, and they met prior during the book launch of Job Sikhala's book in Johannesburg, remember, in 30 August. So on leaving the venue of the meeting, so Tinashe went, brought back the power bank, and then after the meeting, and then they dispersed. On dispersing, Job Sikhala and his uncle went to their car, they drove off. Just after driving off from the venue of the meeting, the police stopped them. When they stopped them, they quickly targeted, after asking them to raise their hands, get out of the car, what the police do. And then when they raised their hands, dropped out of the car, the police, they quickly targeted the front passenger seat. Underneath the front passenger seat, and they discovered plastic bags, which they then said are carrying explosives. And this came as a shock to Job Sikhala and his uncle, of course, because none of them, according to them, knew there was anything like that. Like they don't really, they had no purpose, they don't need to carry or to own explosives. Now, one of the things that came out, according to Job Sikhala, was the people, was he's assuming that, he's alleging that these explosives were planted in the car so that they would be used as a pretext for arresting him. Now, Job Sikhala now is alleging that now these people, they didn't plan properly, because coming to South Africa, I didn't come from Zimbabwe to South Africa. I went to Botswana first, and then I came to South Africa. And on this trip, he was using aeroplanes. That means he has to go through airports, and there is very extensive search that happens on airports. And if he had those explosives, they would have been discovered. So Sikhala also is claiming that he later gathered that the explosives were set up in such a way that they could explode from underneath his seat, and certainly shredding him to pieces. And that speaks to assassination attempts. Now, it would be unthoughtful for any government, as a side comment from me, it would be very much unthoughtful of any government to get rid of their critics by way of assassinating them, by way of killing them. Because what many people do not understand, or what some of the overzealous people and the operatives, what they don't understand is, it is in the best interest of any government to make sure that they protect those that are very critical of them, especially the prominent people like Job Sikhala. Because if anything is to happen to someone like Job Sikhala, if anything is to happen to someone like Tendai Biti, if anything is going to happen to someone like Nelson Chamisa, it's a no-brainer. It does not need a rocket scientist to tell who was behind this. And that's exactly the case. When first this story broke out, I am completely sure it does not take a political scientist just to have the government of Zimbabwe as your number one suspect as to who planted these explosives. Explosives are very easy to find in Zimbabwe. You wouldn't need to come to South Africa to get explosives, or what would be your purpose of bringing explosives from Zimbabwe to South Africa? For what purpose? Really, are we saying? What are we saying? Are we saying they were supposed to be? They were about to be used for criminal purposes, or what? Or was he sourcing them in South Africa to use them in Zimbabwe? But in Zimbabwe, explosives can be found anywhere. Those who have been in the mining sector, they know they can be found. Makorokos Ayese, those that you see in Kwekwe roaming around, if you search them, you will find explosives. In those worksuits, you will find explosives in worksuits. They know where to get them. They can easily be sourced in Zimbabwe. Hey, this really is hard to take, especially concerning Job Sikhala. The man has been through a lot, and sometimes you wonder, the people that are persecuting him, do they not get to a point where they say, guys, enough is enough? Let this man be. You have to be completely heartless, not to have a heart, for you to keep on pursuing this man. You have just spent about 3 years in pre-trial detention. But does this shock us? It does not shock us, because for decades, ZANU-PF has perfected the art of political survival. And in doing so, they co-opt institutions, they silence critics, and bending justice to its will. And now the cycle is repeating itself again, this time with Job Sikhala as the latest victim of a state machinery that thrives on fear and fabrication of evidence. Now, to really understand this, let's step into political science logic. Now, two theories can help us to decode what is happening here. The first one being authoritarianism and the second one being hegemonic stability. So in terms of authoritarianism, which speaks to power maintained through fear and coercion. So when a regime feels threatened, it does not debate. It intimidates you. And then there is a hegemonic stability theory, the idea that the dominant power will go to great length to preserve its dominance. Now in Zimbabwe, that means controlling narratives. It means weakening opposition and ensuring that figures like Sikhala never rise to challenge the throne. Now, we have seen this before many times. Think back to 2008 when opposition leaders were harassed, jailed, tortured, even killed. Over 200 people are reported to have been murdered in the run-up to the 2008 runoff election. Now, think of a guy like Itai Dzamara, a journalist, an activist, just vanished after calling for Mugabe's resignation. His case is still unresolved. No one knows where he is. So these are not isolated instances, but it is the modus operandi of the state. Challenge us, and we will destroy you. We will not let you thrive. And now in 2025, that message has been sent once again, and Job Sikhala, and all of you are listening, all of you are watching it happening. A man who has spent more time in prison than criminals, not for violence, not for theft, not for any criminal activity, but just for his voice. He has been arrested for over 70 times since joining opposition politics on charges that crumble under scrutiny. All of them, he has never been convicted. Never. And now this new episode in South Africa where explosives are planted in his car. But then in all of this, there is a twist, I think. Far-fetched it may be. But what we are seeing now in this latest episode is that maybe the regime is running out of room to operate, especially in Zimbabwe when it comes to Job Sikhala. Maybe, just maybe, we are witnessing what I can call an authoritarian regime that is developing shame. They could have arrested Job Sikhala in Harare. They could have arrested him in broad light. It wouldn't have been the first time. They've done it before many times. Over 70 times before. But perhaps the optics have become, I would say, too costly and too apparent. So what do? Let us let the South African authorities do the job for us, quietly, conveniently. Now the difference between these two jurisdictions, nevertheless, is that South Africa still has a judiciary that functions. And thankfully, Job Sikhala has been granted bail. A small but powerful reminder to us, to all of us, that justice somewhere still breathes. The bigger picture, nevertheless, is that this is not just about Job Sikhala. It's about what his treatment says about Zimbabwe's democracy. Every time an opposition leader is silenced, the political space narrows. And what we are watching is a political system that thrives on polarization, dividing citizens into enemies and into loyalists, a system that stifles discourse, where dissent equals to danger. We just saw what happened to Ibo Mandaza's subs conference war, burned down to ashes, just for being a venue to host a press conference. So we do have a system that stifles discourse. Dissent is equivalent to danger because they may never know where it will go, which way it will go. And probably they're not prepared for the worst. And what we are seeing is a state that confuses national security with regime security. And where does all of this leave us, people of Zimbabwe? My people of Zimbabwe. The arrest of Job Sikhala isn't a new story. This has been happening. It has happened. We are probably going to get to a century of times that this man would be in crosshairs with the security authorities. Now, what I would suggest that we need is that we are going to need the civil society, we are going to need journalists, we are going to need ordinary citizens to keep demanding accountability. Because silence in the face of injustice is complicit. In international law, they say silence is acquiescence. When others are voting at international level, let's say in the United Nations, and you do not vote, you are treated as in agreement to those who voted yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host, Nelson Machka, and this is the Statesman Podcast. If you found this episode insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, democracy doesn't die overnight. It fades. Let us not the Zimbabwean democracy fade. Let's fight for it. Okay. See you next time, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. We move.